Okay, so kick things off. Josh, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do at SANS and outside of SANS?
Sure. So I'm Josh Johnson, certified instructor and course author with SANS. I have developed the new SEC586 course, which is our defensive PowerShell course, all about automation for blue teams using PowerShell. Uh, Outside of work, I get to work with lots of different interesting organizations with respect to defensive security. Uh, Information security organizations, large and small. So I feel like I get a pretty good feel for what organizations are struggling with as a whole, kind of holistically across the board.
Cool. All right. To kick off on the discussion about 586, I'm curious, like, what are the problems that you were trying to solve with the creation of this course? Or what pain points were there out there in the industry that, maybe you're eliminating now with the content you provide in the course?
I'm lucky enough to get to work with many different organizations of large and small sizes with security teams. And one thing I constantly hear is we know what we need to do, but we don't have the people or the staffing or the skills to do that work. And it's consistent across every organization I get to work with. And so what 586 does is really gives you the ability to automate away some of those normal repeatable tasks and really give an analyst or an engineer that some of that time back so that they can provide that value add work rather than repetitive work that we could otherwise automate.
Yeah, one of the things that I hear over and over again is that about this the skills gap, the shortage of qualified security professionals. And from what I hear, it's not really getting any better, it's getting worse. They're trying, and we're trying, things we do at SANS to like for scholarships and encourage younger people to get into the field and break down barriers for people to get in the field is it's all great stuff. But automation can really be you know, a good uh, how would you say it? Like I don't want to say band-aid, band-aid for the skills gap because that doesn't seem like a fair assessment. But I guess how would you view automation in terms of the skills gap? I'll ask you that.
Sure, sure. So first, I think the things that SANS and other organizations are doing to bring more skilled and qualified folks into the field are really important and are going to make a difference. I've worked with so many young, hungry professionals that I know are just going to become rock stars and crush it in this field. So I'm confident we'll get over that hump. But even when we do get over that hump, I still see a need for automation to maximize the efficiency of various teams. And one thing I like to do is just sit and watch a SOC analyst or a security engineer do their job. And what I often find is they have a browser open with like 100 different tabs. They're pivoting between tools. They're doing awesome work. But what if we had a way to get that data from all of those different browser tabs, centralize it for them, do some automation in the analysis, and then give them some kind of cold data set that they can work with. And really, rather than having them poke around in different tools, focus on using the data that we've already aggregated for them, we already put together in a way that they can be efficient in that analysis. So that's where I really see the benefit.
That's a great answer. So and also automation is a big part of this. Why PowerShell? I guess what's the significance of PowerShell?
So I got into PowerShell simply because I was in a Windows environment. It was already there. This great programming language, scripting language, and automation engine was already on every machine that I needed to work with. And so that was my original reason, which maybe isn't the best reason, but it was there and it did the job I needed. From there, I started to learn kind of the fundamentals of PowerShell and this kind of object-oriented approach. And no worries if you don't come from like a computer science background, object-oriented programming, really the idea there is that when we deal with outputs of commands, I run a command to get an IP address. Well, traditionally, if I run like ipconfig on a Windows machine, I have a string of text that I have to parse out to take that value that I'm interested in. With PowerShell, the output of that command is an object, meaning I can just say, give me that object and grab the IP address property of that object rather than doing these funny string parsing things to get to the data. Now, with PowerShell already being everywhere and with PowerShell producing this automated object oriented output, we can scale automation using those same kind of fundamentals. It's already there. Remoting is native. We can easily scale code that we run in one place across the entire environment. And so the fact that it's kind of ubiquitous throughout the environment, and we also have this really reliable object-oriented output from our commands, makes it so that we can build automation that if a command changes its output format, we're not refactoring automation. That stuff is stable and reliable. And from a blue team perspective, I've worked in a SOC, and I've been sitting there with a CISO sitting behind me saying, "What are you doing? Why isn't that working?" And I'm troubleshooting code, and it's no fun for anyone in that situation. PowerShell gives us the ability that we have this stable kind of platform to build our automation from.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound fun. It sounds stressful in
Very
any
stressful.
role to have, the boss standing behind you, but specifically in that sort of task of code and fun stuff. Okay, so taking a step back, what type of job roles is 586 designed for? And I guess give us a little bit of info on who this class is perfect for, who would be, a good follow up for, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So SEC 586 is really designed to teach PowerShell specifically with respect to blue team operations tasks. So everything from identification, protection, to even detection and response, we cover uh, with respect to how do we automate those tasks. And so really it kind of transcends normal roles. It's great for security analysts, security engineers, security architects, but we've also had developers come through the course. We even had an auditor come through the course. And the feedback has always been that it gives them a lot of perspective on automation for things that, the student might be thinking of they want to automate. We give them the basic understanding of PowerShell so that they can take that skill set and apply it to any other kind of day-to-day tasks within their role as well.
Um, are there specific industries that would benefit from this course, or is it kind of, across the full whole gamut?
Hey, it really runs the whole gamut. I would have said a few years ago that, if you're a Windows-oriented shop, then it's really perfect for you. Now that PowerShell is cross-platform, we have the ability to also implement this kind of at scale on non-Windows platforms as well. So, you know, most organizations have some subset of Windows infrastructure, so it kind of automatically lumps them into that it applies to you category. But it also now with more modern versions, we have the ability to go cross-platform and get that same look and feel and that same consistency in our automation across multiple platforms.
And as far as prerequisite skills go, is skills what are required as far as skills, but also maybe SANS courses? Are there any courses that they need? And then maybe not just what required, but what would be suggested?
Sure. So at its most basic, there are no prerequisites. You don't have to come in with a computer science degree or be really skilled at coding to get off and running with SEC 586. I would say that the understanding of the blue team concepts we cover are a nice to have prerequisite. So we'll cover things like, say, deception. We'll automate some deception techniques with PowerShell. Well, understanding how those deception mechanisms work and what we will do with those from an operational perspective is a nice to have prereq, because we're going to take that blue team skill and we're going to focus on automating it. So, we'll teach the PowerShell from the ground up, but that base understanding of the blue team side of things is helpful to have as you kind of come into SEC 586.
Um, and then, it's good to know what they need coming into it, what will be helpful, but then what can they expect to walk away with? And there may be some top skills that students who attend 586 will be able to apply. I know the SANS promises you will be able to apply what you learn immediately upon returning to work. So I know that's kind of our motto here, but what is specific to 586 can students expect to walk away with?
So 586 will leave you with certainly a deep understanding of how to use PowerShell for automation. At its most basic, you'll have that skill set to take PowerShell. I have some task that I need to automate. I will have the skills to use PowerShell to automate that task. Where I think it goes a little bit above and beyond is, since it's so blue team focused, what we did was we picked out kind of the most common pain points. Like, I need to make these two tools talk to each other. Well, we have an integrations module where we build those integrations. We write those API calls or whatever type of integration you're looking to build. We write that code to enable the integration. And so you kind of leave with these practical code segments that are implementing what I see in a lot of organizations as a need in terms of automation. So, we take certainly the PowerShell piece of it very seriously. We focus on teaching PowerShell, but with respect to what I know many organizations are struggling with from a day in day out basis, on the blue team side of things as well.
So you kind of already answered this a little bit. I was going to ask you, why are these skills important? I just want to know, is there anything that you want to add as far as the significance, the importance of these skills, I guess, out there in the real world?
Yeah, I think, things like burnout and staffing problems and turnover, a lot of times what I find is a kind of common cause across those issues is around the fulfilling nature of the work that we're doing. And personally, for me, I don't find it very fulfilling to be doing the same thing over and over, and pivoting between tools and browser tabs and things like that. Certainly incidents are kind of exciting to respond to, so that can help. But I find it fulfilling to make not only my job easier, but the rest of my team's job easier too. And so when I build some automation that I hand over to a client and they say, "Wow, this just saved us X hours a month," I find that to be extremely rewarding. And if I can help kind of push that message out and make more people capable of being that kind of force multiplier within their own organization, I find that is extremely fulfilling, extremely rewarding, and really, the technical skills are one thing, but the ability to drive that value in your organization is really where I see it kind of being a differentiator.
That's great. And another thing that is really important, I think, for all SANS courses, but that our students seem to tell us that they love over and over again, are the hands-on exercises, the labs. So I guess in regard to 586, why are the labs important? And I guess are there certain points or topics that are just reinforced through these hands-on exercises?
Yeah, PowerShell is one of those things that you can't really just read about and be good at as a result. You really have to get your hands on it. You really have to try and fail and pick back up and build on what you've created so far to really make it operational. And so I would say nearly every single module in SEC 586 has an associated hands-on lab. Beyond that, there's an additional kind of challenge engine called PowerPlay, which is essentially a serverless function app that lives out in the cloud that the student brings up an interactive notebook on their VM, and they can play against this challenge engine to further kind of reinforce those skills. Because again, it's not something you can really be book smart about. It requires that hands-on practical usage. The other cool thing about the labs is, again, they're meant to solve real world problems. So you'll go into a lab and it will be, for example, on day one, we do a triage lab. I have an alert for some system that's behaving abnormally. What can I do to triage that? And so we build PowerShell, command by command, and then we start layering them together into functions and, more advanced kind of coding principles, and we layer on all these pieces so that you leave and you have the script that you can simply point at a system and get all of this triage data back from. So not only are the labs hands-on to reinforce the coding skills necessary, but they're also practical in that you can take them back with you and use that code and tweak that code and make it what works for your organization as well.
It's fantastic. All right, then is there a role or topic that's maybe not mainstream, something that is covered in the course that would be hard to find elsewhere?
Yeah, one common complaint I hear about PowerShell, especially from folks coming into the course, they're like, "I've written PowerShell, I can make it do what I need it to do, but it's always slow." And there's some really interesting aspects of the fundamentals of PowerShell. I mentioned that kind of object-oriented nature of the language, that if we don't fully understand and fully leverage those fundamentals, something that we're writing could be slow, but it can very easily be made much, much more efficient. And so one of the comments we cover performance on day two, and one of the comments I always get after day two is like, well, thanks. I have to go redo all this code I've written because now I know why it was slow. And so, performance is certainly not the sexiest topic that you could talk about with respect to PowerShell for blue teams, but it is extremely important when I'm trying to take code that works on one machine and scale it across my environment.
So I know we talked about the types of roles that are, ideal fits for this. People that are working in SOC and how you teach you automation, PowerShell. That's all great. Are there? I guess is does the course lean toward a certain job or role, or a topic?
I would say from a topic perspective, we cover several different aspects of blue team operations. So less so there. From a role perspective, I would say that it applies more to the folks who are kind of hands on in the day to day. This could be, an entry level analyst up through engineer architect. I CISOs, for example, may not find as much kind of hands on keyboard time to do this sort of automation. So really, the kind of hands on folks that are in the trenches, this is where we're focusing this course.
Great. And then once they're done with the course, they'll go back, they'll take the skills back to their job and apply them right away. Then how can they continue their training? Is there another good course at SANS or I guess next step that would be ideal for the student to take to progress?
Yeah, one cool thing I think about 586 is that I've taken a ton of SANS courses myself, and I've when we were putting 586 together, we kind of thought through some of the pain points of things we know are critical for an organization to do, like blocking workstation to workstation traffic, for example. And we thought about those things and said, well, how can we automate them? And so this kind of sets the stage for really any direction you want to go, whether it's defer or sticking with blue team or even offensive operations. We can take these same skills and move them into those different areas because now we've set the base and we have that kind of fundamental backdrop so that no matter what the task, we have the automation skills to make it more efficient.
All right, that's great. And then you mentioned workstation to workstation traffic, blocking it. And I'm just, for someone like me, I'm curious, why is that so critical?
Sure. So malware likes to move around, right? An attacker
Yeah,
lands on an
it
inside
does.
inside of a network, and that attacker or that automation that is being used by the malware is looking for credentials to steal. It's looking to move to other systems to eventually escalate privileges and take those actions on objectives. And so one thing we can do that it is simple in theory is block. I have an HR network. Well, those PCs in that network probably don't need to talk directly to each other. So we can mitigate that workstation to workstation communication by blocking those two machines from talking to each other. And that can be done with several different mechanisms. We can use the network fabric with things like private VLANs to do that, or we can even use the host-based firewall to do it. And so one thing we talk about in 586 is automating Windows firewall, automating host-based firewalls to enable those kind of quick wins. And we talk about it in the sense of this could be an architecture decision and kind of a protection project that we're putting in place, or it could be something we implement as automation as part of our response stack. We know this system is now less trusted in our environment. Well, let's have all of its neighbors block communications from that system, for example. So we use it in quite a few different ways, and it's an architecture concept, but we talk about how we can automate that concept.
Awesome. I love hearing the phrase quick wins. I think that's something that a lot of people love hearing, especially leadership management. They want those quick wins. I guess to flip that on its head a little bit, what type of like long-term benefits can you get from the content covered in this course? The long-term wins, I guess, if that's the phrase.
Sure. So we cover lots of quick wins, certainly, lots of quick things we can do to make things better. From the long term, I think this really gives you the ability to ensure that our folks are working on the most important things. right? So something they're doing day in, day out that we can automate, we're gonna automate that. Long term, I think it gives us the ability to do things like interactive notebooks, SOAR automation playbooks, things to really ensure that we are more quickly responding to those incidents. Malware outbreak, credential compromise, whatever it is we're trying to respond to. We can have these playbooks that are kind of pre-baked automation that we continuously add to cover different systems, to cover different types of attacks, continuously add to this kind of backlog of or this inventory of scripts or automations that we can then put in place when something does happen. So long term, I would say, certainly take the quick wins. Those are awesome. Get them out of the way. But long term, start thinking about from the perspective of my overall program, how can I put automation in place that when the incident happens, because it's inevitable, we all have them. When it happens, what, how few buttons do I have to click to mitigate the risk of that incident?
So would you say, is it fair to say that, students will be able to strengthen their security posture immediately, and then it will only grow over time the more that they implement the automation and the other skills and tactics they learn in the course?
Absolutely. So we'll cover things like hardening and kind of more basic concepts like that and how we can automate those with PowerShell. But we go way beyond that. We go into detection strategies, how to take a ton of data and make sense of it quickly with automation, and then how to kind of automate that response piece of it as well.
Very cool. I'm asking you a personal question about this. What's your favorite part of the course to teach?
Favorite part about the course to teach? I would say day 5 entirely is my favorite part because one cool thing we do with this is we use PowerShell to take advantage of a lot of kind of native features of operating systems that are either hard to get to with other technologies or are just not known about in some organizations. We use things like event tracing for Windows, for example, and we do things like trigger packet captures on an endpoint when some specific thing like a baseline deviation happens. And so the whole stack is automated. So an analyst will go from, all right, I don't know what if that's normal on that system to, well, I've used PowerShell to build some baseline of what normal looks like on a day-to-day basis. And when that deviation occurs, we're going to trigger a packet capture or we're going to trigger some additional logging on this area of interest. And what I find is by the end of that day, it's like, the fire hose has been completely opened up and folks are like, I have so many ideas on how I'm going to take this back and use it like on Monday when I go back to work that again, it's kind of speaks to the SANS promise, but it also is super fulfilling for me to be able to help folks understand what the possibilities are and how they can kind of prioritize those in their day to day.
That's so great. I mean, in that same vein, is there a lab exercise or one of the hands-on exercises that you find particularly fun and or challenging?
Sure. So the labs again, they're kind of focused on the real world implementation of whatever we talk about. And so I'll pick on the deception lab. So we use PowerShell to automate things like honey ports and honey directories, and we do things like take action on a process that touches a honey directory. And so the idea is if 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 there's some ransomware variant on my machine, it touches a honey directory on that machine, we can, for example, pause that process that's running on the machine. So, we can kind of take it a real world example like ransomware that's just encrypting files or searching for data, and we can take immediate action on that malicious process. So
Great.
that's a fun one. The other thing we do is a kind of lesser known feature of PowerShell is when you make a DNS request, you can make that DNS request forcing NetBIOS name service lookups and link local multicast name resolution. So basically, these vulnerable protocols that are often targeted by attackers, we can force PowerShell to emulate this vulnerable request, and then just look for a response. If we see a response to that request, we know someone is taking advantage of that on our network and we can generate our response from there.
That's super interesting. I feel like a lot of students will get a lot of value from that kind of exercise.
That one always gets a
Great.
lot of great feedback.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you for chatting with me and helping me tell everybody about the new course, SEC 586. Are there any final words that you want to share?
I hope to see you around in Sec 586, and when you come, just be ready for that fire hose to open up and to be able to leave with tons of automation skills.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, thank you again.